Hi folks, Modelling Mark here again with the second part of the Quorn Tool and Cutter Grinder video. In this video I'm going to carry on boring out the base castings. I'll get the smaller right hand casting finished. The bigger left hand casting will be finished except for boring out the hole for the vertical column. I need a between centres boring bar to do that, which I don't have at the moment. Right, here's the setup for the smaller base casting. Basically it's on the angle plates, then we've got two strap clamps with the supports here. This one's onto the casting, this one's via another strap clamp to pack it out to clear that boss. I'm not convinced it's going to be that rigid, so I put a machinist jack under here. I've indexed off this face so I can ensure that both this casting and the other base casting, the bars are the same height. Drawings say 1.5 inches. To get the best alignment on the casting, I've got about 1.45, which is fine. I'll say that it's only the height of the feet, it's not critical. And I've respected the 3.5 inch gap between the two bars. That lines up quite nicely on the castings. So the castings clamped back hard against here. I've levelled it this way by just coming down with a bar in the chuck and resting on here and making sure they're the same height. And I double checked here and here and it's all within about 10th thou, so that's casting surface is actually pretty good. Now the operations to do in this setup are to bore this hole, bore that hole, they both need to be 1 inch, machine off this surface so it's nice and flat, and then 3 M3 holes in here. Right, wish me luck. I shall start with this one because that's where the machinist jack is, and when I do this one I'll move the jack over this side somehow, I hope. And now we start the boring operation, and I'm afraid this one is going to be really boring. Right, we're nearly there, just the last 10th thou to go on the bore. About 1 thou over. Top and bottom. That test plug is almost but not quite going in. So hopefully a spring pass will do it, not too much. That's measuring about 3 thou over, and there's a ridge in there somewhere. Ouch! That's going in and sticking, so I think that will do. I'll hone the last little bit out. I don't want to risk another spring pass, because that will take too much out of the top. Okay, that one's done. It's measuring about 2 to 3 thou over at the top and the bottom, and it's just on dimension in the middle, which is why the bar's sticking a little bit. So I'll hone that out. Now I can go and bore this one out. This one needs to be a good sliding fit because the bar's got to move in and out of this freely. Right, I won't show you the boring of this one because it's boring. That's the second hole bored out. So I said that one's sliding fit, not a tight fit. Next job is to just skim this off to clean up the casting so I've got a nice flat surface. Our face is cleaned up nicely now. Last job in this setup is to drill the 3 holes on a 1 1/4 inch PCD. Of course I'm going to use the circle function on the DRO for this. Excuse the background noise, neighbours using a leaf blower. The drawing says a depth of 3/8, but I'll go 1/2 inch. Finally tap the holes. My homemade tap follower. Okay, here's the setup for the second casting. Bolt through that hole, strap clamp on holding that in, strap clamp holding this end in, and the machinist jack just to provide a bit more support and rigidity. Then I can carry on, bore this hole, bore that hole, and then drill and tap the 3 holes here, and face off the top, of course. In case you're wondering what the red is on the boring tool, I was having a bit of problems with the tool rubbing. I couldn't work out where it was rubbing, so it's just a case of putting red Sharpie all over the tool so I could see where that was rubbing off, then take a grinder to that bit. I'll stop recording there because the rest is very boring. That joke never gets old. I'll bring you back when I've finished the boring and start the next operation. Right, that's the 2 bores bored out. That one went nice and easily. Sorry, this one was the right devil. There was a hard spot in the casting and my high-speed steel boring bar wouldn't touch it. I eventually got a carbide insert boring bar to go through it, and then finished off with a high-speed steel boring bar. It gave a nice parallel finish, and the surface is not too bad. It's not quite as good as that one, but it'll do. This one the bar is going to be glued into, so the surface finish doesn't really matter as long as the bar goes in. So now I'm going to mill this one off flat, so I've got a nice flat surface to put the hole features on here. Now I really wanted to come all the way up here with the flattening this off, because I'm going to be bolting this to the lathe saddle, and I wanted that supported all the way along, or at least I didn't want any lumps poking out, but that's the limit of the travel on the bed, so I'm going to have to work around that. For the last cut. Okay, that's cleaned up nicely, apart from a little tiny spot there, but by the time that's painted that won't notice. So the next task is to drill and tap these 3 holes. As if by magic, 3 tapped holes appear. The last features for this side are there's 2 M6 holes here, which are for grub screws to clamp the vertical column. Now while everything's set up, I'm just going to mark the position with the centre drill. I'm not going to actually drill or tap all the way through because I don't want an interrupted cut when I'm boring the hole for this. was lucky with that one. It's just on the limit of the wide travel on the mill table. But the height obviously not critical. The X position is not too critical because there's a very generous flat on the shaft. After I've bored the hole for the shaft, then I'll drill and tap these two. That's it for this setup. So here's the setup, strap clamp holding it down, second strap clamp holding this down. Of course this is the milled surface, so that's flat, so that's nice and solid. The next task is to mill this off flat and drill 3 holes in here. I've lined it up by eye against the slots on the milling table. It only needs to be near enough because it's just for drilling these 3 holes. If they're a degree or so out, it doesn't matter. Now I've finally got myself a coaxial indicator and I've set this up to centre the hole. Centred about as close as I can get it. It's a Chinese import coaxial indicator. I don't think it's super accurate, but it's close enough. At least it's close enough without spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Now I've got the hole centred and the DRO zeroed, I'll mill this flat before I'd start drilling the 3 holes. Okay, now that's cleaned up nicely. Now back to the zeros on the DRO, and I can redo the 3 holes, same as before. I'll finish drilling and tapping those holes off camera. It's nothing you haven't seen before. That's it for that part, except for boring the hole for the vertical column. I can't do that at the moment because I haven't got the between centres boring bar yet. Here's the finished left hand base casting. Just that little bit of blending with the file to do there. Bit of tidying up here. And of course that hole to bore out. But that's come out quite nicely. Moving on to the right hand base casting. The next task is to drill and ream the hole for the cotter. Here's the setup. There's an angle plate in the mill that's been clocked true on the y-axis, and the casting is held by a couple of strap clamps. This is a nice rigid setup. I'm going to mill this flat, then I'm going to put a dummy block in here, use an edge finder to find the centre of the bore, then come over the offset, drill the hole, ream the hole, and Bob's your uncle. We'll start by milling this flat so we've got a flat surface to work from. That's cleaned up nicely. The chuck is now set on the centre line of the main bore. I've got my aluminium plug which will help the drill run straight. Now I need an X offset of 0.677 inches. That's 0.677 on the DRO, and the Y offset will just be making sure that this is even in the casting. It's a 1/2 inch bar and it's a 1/2 inch cotter pin that needs to go in there, and that's looking pretty good. And the depth of the hole needs to be 1 inch. Plan B, I've put the plug in from the rear, so the drill is pulling it in. Now I'm run out of headroom on the mill. You can see I've got about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm taking my set of sacrificial drills. They're the ones that have been ground at odd angles and flat bottomed holes and things, and I'm going to shorten it so that I can just get it in there. I'll just take a bit off this end of the drill. Angle grinder made quick work of that, and then took off the burrs with a bench grinder. And now I've got just enough. Finally go in with the 1/2 inch reamer. Now the reamer is on a Morse taper, so I've got plenty of headroom now. Okay, that's a hole reamed. It is a little bit tight there. So I'm going to take the end mill and just clear out that a tiny smidge. Alright, I'm going to do this trying to take off the minimum height I can, maybe a couple of thou. That seems to work quite nicely. That's a 5/8 cutter, and I just ran it straight in until it was central over the hole, so 0, on the DRO, and it's just taken a nice scallop out of there. Then the rest I can blend in with a file, and I barely scratched the surface there, so that's good. And that's the scallop that the drill took out of the aluminium plug. Again, quite a nice overlap for the cotter pin to grip on. Okay, the final operations on this piece are to clean up the castings. I'm going to do both sides and then drill the 3 holes for the end cap. I'm going to go in this way just far enough so it just starts to clean up the edge of this mounting bolt bush. Okay, that's just started to brush on the bottom of that bush, so I should leave that there. The DRO is set to 0, so I can get back to that point. Now I can clean up the rest of it. Okay, that's cleaned up nicely. I shall do the same on the other side. I won't video that, and then I shall do these 3 holes. That's the milling done, that's cleaned up nicely both sides. Now I've got my coaxial indicator and needle's moving a little bit. I put it in the collet this time rather than 3-jaw chuck. I've lined it up as carefully as I can. It's still showing a little bit of variation, which some of it might be down to machining marks. But I think that's pretty close. So again, DRO set to 00 now. So now I can carry on drill the 3 holes. And just like that, 3 holes appear. Here's the right hand base casting. Again with the single foot. So the hole for the cotter. This is the 3 holes to secure the end cap and 3 holes to secure the dust cap. Again, a little bit of tidying up with the file, but that's come out quite nicely. That's it for this video, folks. Thanks for watching. The next Quorn video will be some of the ancillary parts for the base, but the next video I publish will probably be something else. So we'll be back to the Quorn in a couple of weeks. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, leave them below. I read them all and I answer nearly all of them. Thank you. See you soon.